Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in Richland County. Dr. John Boyle is accused of killing his wife Noreen and burying her body.
The 12-year-old son finally took the stand.
Boyle confidently told the jury it was his decision to testify against his father.
I heard a scream. I heard a thud. It was about this loud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
I decided at an early age that our trauma should not be what defines us. It's what we choose to do with it that does. I'm here to share my unique perspective on true crime, mental health, society, and popular culture, and always with a slight sense of humor. I'm Collier Landry, and welcome to my show. Mover Nation, what's going on? What's going on? What was going on today in the world of the Karen Read trial? Total shocker, bombshell. Michael Procter, Trooper Michael Procter, got on the witness stand and said some things that I don't ever say on this show, and that I never expected would come out in a courtroom. And of course, I had to bring friend of the show, retired Massachusetts State Trooper Todd McGhee back on to talk about this, because we just talked the other day about, will Michael Procter even testify? And the fact that that he showed up today, I think it was a bombshell for everyone. I was walking my little sweet Marisol this morning, and then I get the message, Proctor's on the stand. I'm like, that's a joke. Come on, that's a joke. Wait, rush in, and there he is. I mean, yesterday, as I talked on my live, this guy's like a ghost. I couldn't find anything about this guy online. I was looking for articles. I was looking for photographs of him. And all of a sudden, there he is in the flesh in this courtroom, like he's like a specter. And it's so weird because when you think about trials, especially criminal trials, there's somebody who's on trial. And this particular trial with Karen Read, like, you have, like, there's always a villain, right? There's always a villain. There's usually the person that's on trial. You're like, okay, they're on trial for killing a police officer. They're on trial for second-degree murder. But clearly, with the outgoing, everyone believes, that she is, getting stonewalled, whatever you want to call it. But literally, the trooper the investigator at the center of this is really the villain, this masked, this, like I said, a specter, a phantasm, whatever it is. And to see him be in the courtroom, you're like, is this really happening? And then what comes out of the man's mouth, we won't even talk about. But I'm going to bring on my guest today is Todd McGhee. He is a retired Massachusetts State Trooper. He is also a consultant for homeland security, for all kinds of anti-terrorism tactics, et cetera, et cetera. He works in the civilian side of things now, as in the law enforcement side, but educating law enforcement professionals is really what he is known for now, along with being a commentator and coming on shows and giving his absolute professional acumen. And that professional acumen is something that we're going to tap into, because we did not see that in court today. So please welcome my guest, Todd McGhee. Todd, how are you, man? Oh no, you're muted now.
Okay, we're back.
There we go. We did tech support. We did tech before this to make sure that we didn't have any issues this time. So,
That's right. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, man. And just so, man, there's a lot to unpack with this case. And I think you're the perfect person to talk about this, given your former profession, given your just area of expertise in this. And, we were just wondering a few days ago, is he going to testify? Is that going to happen? And lo and behold, like a figment of our imagination, just whoop, there he is. What did you think, just from your first reaction?
I had the same first reaction as you. Didn't see him coming on the stand Monday morning, starting off the week of testimony. But I think what we all witnessed today on the side of the prosecution, as I mentioned to you prior to the show, was the prosecution. This was a rip off the Band-Aid moment. He had to be called first, regardless of what the testimony that's going to come out. He had to be called by the prosecution first. And here was the benefit of what I could see coming out of today's testimony. There's no testimony tomorrow. They'll be back on Wednesday. But the best thing that came out of today was Attorney Lally painting the most professional image of Trooper Proctor that he could. And I got my tongue on my cheek when I say that. But think about if the defense, if Jackson and Yannetti had called him first,
Sure.
and that was one of the plays that could have happened. Had the prosecution not called Trooper Proctor first, the jury would not have heard the methodical steps of the investigation. Whether they're flawed or not, that remains to be seen. But the early, until Attorney Lally started talking about the text messages and the things that were contained and the language that was used in there, the lack of professionalism. And again, with all due respect to Trooper Proctor, former brother Trooper, I wish him the best in his career. But again, not a proud moment to have to testify to your own language, to your own words. So there you own it. So that being said, the attorney for the prosecution, Attorney Lally, did his best to put the best shoe forward for Trooper Proctor, understanding and knowing that it was going to be eviscerated on cross.
Yeah, that it was. Okay, so I'm going to play some video here in a little bit to catch people up to speed, but at the core of his testimony, and I remember as I was watching it, and it was, you know, I could sense they were getting into it, and these text messages, because, you know, 2 weeks ago when I knew zero about this case, you and I did an episode on this show, and I said, what is going on? And you mentioned these misogynistic texts, these things that were that could come to light with Proctor, and the scanning for nudes on the phone and all of this stuff. And of course you're a professional, and I believed you, but I was like, there's no way. Because I don't think anyone ever really wants to think it's like, look, there are many, and I know there's an acronym for it. I can't remember what it is, but it's, you know, about police officers. There's, you know, there is a lot of angst with law enforcement in this country and a lot of mistrust.
Yes.
But I think that anything like that would ever come out. And there's the LAPD copter right over my over my shoulder right now. You can
As
hear
we
it.
speak.
But I never did I think that was actually going to come out. And I did think in a lot of ways they were, oh wow, it's really right over my place. They found me. I don't know what to do. But I guess part of it is you want to sort of suck the oxygen out of it a little bit and not give it any oxygen and fuel for the defense. But as someone who was, you know, behind the shield, right, or wore the shield, when you hear something like that, what is the first effect? Like, how does it just cut you to the core and just go, this guy's just such an embarrassment? Or what is your reaction?
How about nails against a chalkboard?
Okay.
That was the gut reaction, listening. And I've been in front of judges, I've been in front of juries, and the last thing you want to be explaining is your conduct. The last thing you want to be displaying or explaining is some provocative statements that were in as a part of the investigation. Let the evidence show where the case is going. Let the witnesses, let the evidence that was collected be the focus, not the focus on yourself. That's a horrible feeling, having to be in front of judge and jury.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And there was a comment here. It seemed as if class and integrity never stood up for John O'Keefe. My heart goes out to his family. No one did right by him. I mean, I think that's just the thing that strikes me is just so wild is
John O'Keefe deserves more. That's the bottom line. He deserves more. The professionalism all around, all the departments owe it to him to you know, for the legacy that he left behind. The due process for his family, his loved ones, the memories that they have in this tragedy that they're going through. They don't have full, complete answers yet. So there's just so many injustices on so many levels here.
And the thing I think about is, and I said this at the end of I was live streaming the trial for my audience, and I went back and played the defense's round of questioning, which I'm going to play here in a second. But, you know, forget that it's Karen Reed. Forget that it's a woman. You know, it could be Sally, Jim, Bob, whoever it is. Put any person in that situation and then see how law enforcement has behaved. And just this sort of myopia of just his text messages and saying, I believe one of the you know, calling her scum, or, you know, or she did it, or, you know, she's guilty as sin. And just not even, and this is the days or in the moment of the investigation, to not try to find anything else out, to not do like the police work that feels like should have happened in this case. That's, I think, what really grabs me is like, look, I'm the son of a perpetrator and a victim, right? I can see both sides of this. It's
Right.
not, it feels it's like what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? I think that's probably the hardest thing to explain. Is this, you know, like I said, I'm going to play some of these statements in a minute, but do you feel like that's probably one of the most egregious things here, besides the profanity, besides the misogyny, just this lack of investigation?
Collier, I can tell you from this perspective, in reflection of this case, and again, this is just my humble opinion. Initially, with Canton Police's response, as an agency, they didn't know what they had. They knew they had a victim of what they didn't know. They didn't come out with their very best effort. That's clear. There were some nuances where John O'Keefe hadn't passed away yet, and he was transported, and they were trying to revive him. So statutorily speaking, the state police is not going to come out if there's not a fatal. So that's just the way it is. That has nothing to do with good policing, bad policing. That's just protocol. He now arrives at the local hospital. At some point thereafter, he passes. His body expires. At that point, that now triggers state police involvement. There's a lot of damage that was done. There was no proper crime scene that was set up. They opened the crime scene after just a couple of hours before state police could come in. So it was almost set up to fail right from the beginning. No witnesses from inside the house. So there was just a number of fail points right from the beginning of this case.
I mean, they literally are circling over my house. This is crazy. You know, I was talking about this, and I was in high school when O.J. Simpson's trial was on, and obviously we did not have YouTube to watch trials on, or to sneak in the bathroom. And I remember, I think we watched maybe a couple days of it in, you know, government class or whatever, which was just weird. Well, we don't have to do work. We can just do this. Is what we get to do today, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's like having a cool, fun day. Yeah, exactly. But one of the things that made me think about, and correct me wrong because I don't remember this, but I do remember, you know, Mark Furman, right, who was the detective on the case, and then this whole thing about his racist comments, usage of racial slurs, as if it's as if he was just, you know, handing out candy. And to describe, you know, prior arrests that he had made, correct, and prior defendants. And even though I think we all realize that the Simpson case was probably, you know, mishandled by you know, what have you, whatever your opinion is on it, he was acquitted in a court of law, but I think a lot of people feel differently. Yep. That was a situation where, because I remember Marsha Clark had this massive cloud of shame. Christopher Darden had this massive cloud of shame after the trial, just like they didn't get the conviction. But part of that was Furman's sort of this explosiveness, but that wasn't something that, again, like, this is where I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. The prosecution didn't really know about that, right? They may have heard rumors, but they weren't like, okay, we're going to just serve this up and throw this out there. Lolly, the prosecutor here, has just thrown all this out there. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I think there's layers to where you're going with this. going back to Furman's comments, there was that moment in time to say, was the investigation from the field, in the case of O.J. Simpson, in a wrongful death of his wife and her friend, Ron Goldman, I believe it was.
Yeah, Ron Goldman. Yeah, yeah.
It was the first really attack on the credibility of biasness. That's exactly where Alan Jackson went today. The testimony today, once it went to cross, brought out, you made comments about my colleague, Attorney Yannetti. You made comments, derogatory remarks about my client. And oh, by the way, the judge made very clear, Trooper Proctor, these are your words. You can't make spellings of derogatory words. So that I didn't see coming either.
That the judge made him say the words instead of spell it out.
Yes.
I was shocked that happened too.
Yes.
A lot of people are calling her Auntie Bev and assuming and asserting that she does have a sort of hidden agenda in this trial. Did that strike you as odd that she did that today?
That struck me very odd. It was very clear and explicit as to, I mean, he spelled it out based on reading his text messages, but for her to correct him and say, these are your words in front of the jury, you will say the word. So that was a powerful moment right there. And that really set the stage for Attorney Jackson to really start to hammer home the biasness or potential biasness of the investigation. That whole series of questions along those lines was really attacking that aspect of credibility of you investigated this murder with biasness right from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the moment here where he says what he said. I mean, it was yeah, and again, that bias of you had it out for my client from Jump Street, right?
Yes.
You talk about the sort of somebody says 10 women in the jury. Is that correct?
No, that sounds high.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the courtroom. It doesn't look like there's many people in the courtroom, period. Why, by the way, why is the courtroom so small? Is that just a math?
It's Sacco and Vanzetti back in Lord knows when Christ was a corporal, that courtroom was there. It's just an old district courthouse, and that's the way they built them.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say it's very cozy in there. And somebody brought up here that he said he hated her lawyer. It says Law and Order 2.0 says 10 women, 7 men, something like that.
I thought it was more like 5 and 7 was the breakdown.
Got it. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Again, I'm not there, so I have no idea. Yeah. We have 19, 10 women also. There's all kinds of we were down to 17, 10 women, 7 men. Somebody says lots of people weighing in here. The law nerds have joined our live chat, which is great because I love it when I get a little bit of education for sure. Let me grab this sort of this file here because and we'll kind of scroll through it for those that did not get to see what happened today. It was a real thing.
Oh yeah.
Testimony continues.
We're gonna get rid of that. Let's see here if we can get
how would you describe this context of this conversation or why that's being discussed at this time?
Again, I don't know the thought process of my sister and Julie as far as.
Oh, this is okay. So this is him talking about his relationship to the Alberts, right? He gets it. Oh, sorry. There we go. Whoops. This is him talking about his relationship with the Alberts. How do you think that played out today?
Well, he had mentioned Attorney Jackson went down and started to try to connect the dots on relationships, his relationships to the Alberts.
Yep.
And it was one of the Alberts he said they had never met until this until John O'Keefe died. So it was interesting to see. I think there's more to be pulled out that Jackson and Yannetti will pull out in that exchange. But I think there's something else that could be in the realm of questioning by the defense is, what about spouses? So he may not have had any type of a connection to one of the Alberts,
Yeah.
but what about spouses or sisters? It came up in testimony today that one of the Albert wives knows his sister, and that was talked about on the stand as well.
Yeah, he and he described his relationship with his sister, talking every day, this very personal relationship, and tried to sort of bifurcate that with, like, what I don't know the McCabe's, I don't know the Alberts, I don't know these people, but they do. And he sort of laid out the very incestuous nature that was there of Brian Albert, Colin Albert, the Julie Albert, who was friends with his sister. Does that, before we get to the bias, as far as his honing in on Karen Reed as his only target, does that in and of itself discount his testimony before the jury just because it was 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
It leads to reasonable doubt. It leads to, if I'm one of the jurors and I'm hearing that, okay, testimony that there's no connection or relation, and then now I hear a question posed in a different format, and I hear a different answer to a similar question, right? Things should be consistent. No matter how you ask the question, you should get the same response. And if I'm hearing these nuances and subtleties, if the attorney asks a question in a different format, a different way, and you hear the judge saying that, Lally will object, and she'll allow Yannetti or Jackson rephrase the question. They'll object again, rephrase the question, right? So the more they keep peppering these questions in when the witness is allowed to respond, and there's a variance, changing context. Well, I don't really know them, but my sister, who I text 2,000 times over the course of a 12-month period, does. It starts to scratch. You start to scratch your head as to, well, does he have a relationship or not? And so I think that aspect of it is something that is going to be much more of a tool to be utilized by the defense as they continue down this line of questioning.
Yeah, I just I found it very I found it very, very interesting to say the least with these relationships. And I understand, like, look, this is a small town community and everybody does know everybody. But is that a situation as a law enforcement officer where you just recuse yourself from Jump Street? You go, like, I know too many people here. I can't have anything to do with this just because I don't want the smoke. I don't want any of this to backfire on me. Is that like standard operating procedure, or do you just say, no, screw it, I'm going to do my job?
I'll give you a personal example. I grew up in a community north of Boston. It's called Lynn, Lynn. And the old saying is Lynn, the city of sin, right? So you had Hell's Angels, you had mafia, you had other biker gangs, and then you had the local, pickpockets and thugs, and you had your local gang, your local drug dealers. Not so much gangs back then when I was growing up, 70s and 80s, but you certainly had, drugs. In my career, I never wanted to work narcotics because I thought along the way in an investigation or in undercover work, I would know somebody, and I didn't want to put myself in that type of a situation. There's so much more policing that can be done without having to go in that line of work. It was the nature of the city. it was the nature of the city that I grew up in, all of the players in all of the underground activities that were happening within the city. And I just, as a police officer, I didn't want to police that. And it didn't, you just have to have the forethought to say, kind of play the what if game.
Sure.
What if I'm involved? What if this scenario happens? Or what if this particular type of thing happens? I remember working the overnights, working accident reconstruction. So if there was a bad car accident, we get called out, we do the investigation. One particular accident, I knew the operator, and I used to hang out with him. We used to do all the clubs together. And I said to him, I go, listen, you got to get home. I said, the investigation's the investigation, but I couldn't say to him, I'll let you know what's happening. I couldn't give him a heads up tip. I couldn't say to him, don't worry about it. Wink, wink, nod, nod. I just couldn't do it. Unfortunately, it was only one time that I had that experience. But even in that particular case, you have to detach yourself from these things. And if it's a recusal, then it's a recusal. If it's disclosing the relationship as part of that, then that's what you have to do. You don't. That's not an option available for you if you're going to be professional about your duties.
Speaking of the accident reconstruction, you know, in the morning session, because they brought Proctor in, I think at 11 a.m., 11:15, something like that. They have him pull out the taillight, and I'm gonna bring this up here. And I wanted to talk to you about what was the specifics? What
Testimony
plays automatically? Sorry. Talk to me about why they had him bring these bags out, have this piece of the taillight. What was the significance here of this? Because he's just sort of like taking it out of the box and this whole thing. And, you know, what is the thought process behind this?
I think we need to go back to, I think we need to go back to last week's testimony about the video that was playing before the jury that was inverted. And it appeared as if the vehicle was staged inside the Sallyport, the garage, as looking at it directly. So passenger side view.
Yes.
As it turned out, it was inverted. So we were looking at driver's side view. So it gave the appearance visually, without any type of instruction to the jury, that the passenger side of the vehicle was intact, knowing that the damage in question was on the opposite side. What then made it kind of raise an eyebrow was that you saw activity. You saw a human being working somewhere in proximity of the back corner of that opposite side of Karen Reed's vehicle. This was at some point within, the vehicle being examined by the forensic lab. It's back Sallyport, where pieces taken off. That's all the allegations by Attorney Yannetti and Attorney Jackson. Was any part of this tail lens tampered with? And so I think they were trying to really see his reaction and get an understanding as to, he testified when Attorney Lally asked him, he said that he did not touch at all the tail lens. So I think Jackson was trying to set him up for future questions to see what his reaction would be like during this examination and part of the questioning.
Yeah, and he didn't really even get to that. And because they brought Buchanan back on the stand again today. That guy was on the stand for what, like three days in total now. Yes. This new video surfaced that they played right here, which is this alternate angle, which earlier they were showing this. There's me in my fun little hoodie. So there's obviously the Sallyport video that was inverted or mirrored that gave this impression that was the passenger side. And then he's questioning about it again. But then they show this, and it was a very dark screen. There's me showing the actual video of the Sallyport when I flipped it. And then there's the court, and I'll find it here in a second. They had this one screenshot that I saw that was very, very dark. Well, I guess I can't find it here. Well, let's go to the actual video where they were showing him. This is this new like alternate angle that they had, which I didn't really get. And earlier they had showed it was really, really dark. This is brighter. Where did this video come from?
Collier, I'm not sure on this one. I'm not sure if this, well, the vehicle looks clean, so it has to be after the original tow. So this may have made it from the parents' home back to the Sally Port. I'm not clear about the other crime lab investigators, if they had come out, but Trooper Proctor testified that there were some days that actually warmed up, and all that snow would have melted off of the vehicle. We had some warmer days, so it looks a lot cleaner than it did in some of the other video. But nonetheless, you know, here it is with activity, and it looks like an awfully tight space. That's a terrible way to secure a vehicle.
Well, yeah. Terrible. Yeah, and you talked about originally on the police work to begin with securing the scene. Yeah, I understand this is the other angle, but it's just we haven't seen any of this yet. And it's all of a sudden to have it come out in the trial as if like, oh, okay, now we have this. You know, can you weigh in on this? And you know, and I've seen part of this video when they're taking the taillight off and the time code jumps, and that time code was, by the way, was dated February the 1st, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. This other angle that the prosecution introduced here, what was the purpose behind that? That's what I didn't really understand.
I'll speak to it from the defense side. They challenged the motion trigger on the video. The video as presented was presented in chunks of time. And so as the video frames had advanced, they were showing missing segments of time. So the defense was certainly capturing that aspect of it. As it relates to the prosecution, I believe they were just trying to corroborate that their witnesses are corroborating that the vehicle tail lens was damaged the way they said it was. And here's the timeline to prove it, even those chunks of time missing.
You know, in my other life, I'm a filmmaker, and I know a lot about cameras. And I just find this this footage to not be very good. And I would imagine in a police department they would have good cameras, because I've had to edit surveillance footage for court cases before, and these cameras were way better than these, and they're not at a police station. They're at private property. So I don't quite understand why the video, the quality is so low. Is that just department funding? Is that because they don't really like to document these things? Is there something a little more nefarious going on, which a lot of people have suggested?
I think it doesn't matter until it matters. I think you had a situation where 1,000 times there's been evidence secured in the Sally Port and the video never came into question. And so the poor quality and being called on the poor quality, never, as an agency, we never thought to upgrade the camera systems in this area. It's a low priority issue. And unfortunately, it's a significant factor in this case.
Well, that makes sense then. They did play in the morning as well. They did play the entirety of the video, but here he is with the lens, and they did just sort of let it play out as well. They brought up this, you know, they brought up this video, surveillance video from John O'Keefe's house, right? And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, he had said that he accessed this video from John O'Keefe's phone. Now, that was prior to him actually getting a search warrant. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So, okay. You're giving me that look like, yes. Yes, that's right. You heard that correct. I think that's the thing, is I listened to this case and and I feel like we're all gaslighting ourselves because we're like, this can't be true. Like, there's no way that he's gonna say that this is what happened. And then you're like, wait, did he say that? I think I said we're all living in Andrew Tate's matrix that he's created. We all took the blue pill or whatever or red pill or whatever. And we're all
Collier, that came out today regarding the there's one part of the testimony regarding my mind's escaping me. This was when Attorney Lally was questioning Trooper Proctor on the onset. And he said, was there something that caused you to stop going through Karen Reed's phone? And he had said that he had noticed some communication between her and her attorney. And right then and there, it was as if she requested counsel, and, it was kind of like, good job, himself in the back. And he did.
That's right. I remember that.
He did the right thing. And so it's all of the conduct before that is what's in question. So again, there you have access to evidence that's being introduced. Warrants are a thing. You have to have them. There should have been a warrant well before you start scrolling through anything.
Especially because he believes she was guilty of murder.
Right. And going back to my criminal justice days, and I have a master's in criminal justice, it's called Fruits of the Poisonous Tree. Right. So if you get evidence and you introduce the evidence and you obtained it unlawfully, it's going to be suppressed in court.
Because we see this in mafia trials, don't we? I mean, isn't this like, you saw this in like it wasn't when John Gotti was on trial. This was a whole thing. It was like, you got him red-handed, but they had to throw out the whole case. I mean, it's certainly a plot of a Scorsese movie. That I definitely know. I just don't know which one it was. But,
it's tough. It's tough to watch this.
It really is. And so where do they go from here? How does the prosecution walk this back, or is he just not even walk this back? He's just like, whatever, it's out, cat's out of the bag.
Well, your timeline was accurate. Trooper Proctor approximately got on the stand at 11:15, and the trial, today's testimony was supposed to go until 4:30, and I think the judges had heard enough and cut it at 4 p.m. Eastern. So I don't know. Well, we'll see what cross-examine brings tomorrow, but on redirect, I don't know what can be cleaned up. I mean, these are his words. This is his communication via text to supervisors, to friends across the country and other states, and just really out of source with so many different things. So that's going to be, like I said, this was a rip the Band-Aid off moment for the prosecution to get it done and over with. And maybe the play now is to try to just refocus on the other areas that they feel that they have a stronger position on.
It feels like that, but you brought up a really key point, because that was something that, racked my spidey senses as I'm listening to it. He started talking about like his text message chain, and it was to somebody in Tennessee, I believe, or Louisville, Kentucky, or something. Tennessee, I believe. And I thought to myself, and I believe that person was in law enforcement. So is it, when there's communication between law enforcement officers that crosses state lines about something that they're investigating, I mean, is this type of communication allowed? I guess is like the bottom line. Can you communicate with your buddies? And was this, and is the reason why all these text messages, and I'll get to this in a second with where the text messages came from or provided to by the court, or to the court by someone else. My question is, can you have this type of communication with other officers while you are on an investigation?
I cannot recall if there's anything statutory prohibiting that behavior. However, procedurally, you just keep that information tight to the vest. Okay, I've got a close friend, whatever your relationship is. Hey, I heard you're on this case. Well, yep, there's some things I can talk about. There's some things I can't talk about. But it was intimate information that was being, as part of the investigation, intimate information, intimate details A lot of it was evidentiary, and then it just went really south from there, not in a good way, as far as how he was describing Karen Reed, how he was describing Karen Reed's attorney. I hate this guy. It just really gave Attorney Jackson the opportunity to really paint that bias picture.
I mean, calling her, well, I guess we have to say the R word, but just derogatory comments that seemed very unnecessary. Now, somebody brought up, because I was curious too. And look, we know that people talk about this. Like we know that people talk like this. I think the most famous hot mic situation happened about 8 years ago during the election with Trump and the whole thing on whatever it was, Entertainment Tonight or Billy, whatever his name was. And, all that, so we know people are always listening, but does it matter that this was this a work phone or was this his personal phone? And how is this admissible even?
I believe it was his personal phone, and based on the allegations of misconduct, it was probably subpoenaed in as evidence, just like Karen Reed's phone was. And, that's a whole nother story about, I heard today that Department of Justice was wiretapping Michael Morrissey, DA Morrissey's, like, what is that about? Right? That's a whole nother angle to this thing. So
you just heard that today? Because I heard that last week. I spoke to somebody off the record and they told me this. Morrissey, and so one of the things that is been called to my attention, and you might know this too, is the fact that these text messages have all been provided, because he says there's 30,000 or whatever, 37,000 text messages. From what I understand from confidential sources is that this was provided to both the prosecution and the defense because of federal grand juries that occurred and interviews that happened last summer of the McCabe's, the Alberts, of Proctor, of Morrissey, and this is part of a larger case. And back a couple of weeks ago when Jackson and Yannetti are saying to them, well, if you refer to you didn't say that when you were interviewed, that's what they're referring to, is it because apparently the Department of Justice is like, you can't say this, but here's all the info because we have something else happening. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding, and that's a part of disclosure, right? That both sides, prosecution, defense, have a right to see. It's a requirement. They have a right to see all of this, anything that was introduced as evidence. And the Department of Justice is not going to get involved unless there's some type of misconduct on the part of government, right? In this case, the state. So again, there's a whole nother side of this thing that we haven't even peeled chapter 1 back on yet.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, and just it's kind of interesting when you hear something and then it comes to fruition. You're watching it play out.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Somebody tells me this, and I'm like, oh, this is exactly what they were talking about.
And here it is in your face, playing out.
It's in your face playing out. You couldn't script a better story out of this. You really couldn't. It is like a true crime novel playing out in front of us. Federal grand jury testimony, can't say that it's a federal grand jury and testimony because it's more prejudicial than probative, says Activista. But yeah, that is my understanding, is they basically turned over these documents to both parties and said, you guys both get it, but this is what it is, but you can't talk about it. What a mess. And somebody writes, Iris Hewlett writes, justice for Officer O'Keefe and his family. At this point, what does this even look like, man? The whole thing is like blown up in the prosecution's face, or am I mistaken? How do they repair this?
So week 8 we're in. We start week 8 this week. Yeah, we're all losing track of time. It's been forever and a day. I don't see how the prosecution fixes anything. Your witnesses, it looks like the witness list is coming to exhaustion. We see some more forensic witnesses on the forensic sides of things. We still need to wait on the hearing regarding that dog expert, the bite expert, and the accident reconstructionist, right? So that was what was discussed first thing this morning.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
We've got to see if the judge allows that finally in, and then I think both sides will close their their testimony, and they'll rest. Each side will rest, and then from there it's closing arguments, and then the jury will get their instructions.
And when do you see that being? To end of the month?
I think we're in a different pace now, and I think the judge is expressing a sense of urgency without saying it. And what was actually, let me take that back. She said earlier today, before they closed for their testimony, she said something to the effect of, based on our conversations at sidebar, I have given the jury an end date of June something. So that seems like she's kind of drawing a line in the sand as far as how much longer both sides can call witnesses and present their case. So looks like we're past the halfway point, and we're going downhill at this point. No pun intended.
Right. For the defense, somebody had said they're looking at 4 days worth of testimony or arguments. Does that seem realistic? I mean, the prosecution has taken 8 weeks and they get 4 days. Does that seem even realistic? Or is it because they've been able to do such effective cross on everyone that's all they're really going to need?
I think they can wrap up. I think that the cross-examination, because they came guns blaring right from day one. They did not have a strategy of build, and then, off like a rocket. They, right from the opportunity of cross-examination, they started punching holes. So I think if they can succinctly put together a timeline, and then from there add in the discrepancies to create just one doubt in one juror's mind, they've done their job, and they've done it effectively.
Where does Michael Procter go from here? I mean, this is like established now in the annals of, I mean, everybody's watching this thing. Everybody's seen this. I mean,
yeah, I'm going to give you first knowledge. It could be something. I don't think it's worthy of termination. It could be worthy of some type of sanction, and then transfer outside of the unit as far as punishment goes. That being said, it still depends on what the feds have. Now, termination will come in if he's perjured himself somewhere along the ways, at the district level, at the grand jury level. That's one issue. An in-between issue of being disciplined internally from the internals affair, whatever the internal affairs presents their findings, and then from there, the superintendent or their designee will provide the punishment or the discipline. Here's something that we have: a police officers and state agency. Police officers here in Massachusetts, a change is that police officers, I believe, and again, I need to fact check this, but sworn officers are now licensed. So, and you're licensed through post. And so if your credibility has been compromised based on misconduct, there's a bad boy list, bad girl list called the Brady list. And that means that if your testimony or you've compromised yourself somewhere along the lines in the performance of your duty, you make this Brady list. And so now you're basically rendered ineffective in the court of law, because every attorney that you appear before is going to bring up that you're on the Brady list. And it's just also going back. I think we talked about this, but let's not. It's worthwhile bringing it up again. What were the other cases that Trooper Proctor investigated where he was the lead investigator, same type of scenario, Are those cases going to be called into question? Right. So this story is far from done. The trial will end, but the story will continue.
And this is going to follow him everywhere.
Yes. Yes.
I do want to point something out. Is it really fair to call the naughty list the Brady list? Didn't he give you New Englanders enough 6 Super Bowls? Wasn't that enough to get him a little more respect than calling it the Brady list?
Just bad name call. Just a bad name call. Yeah.
We always have to have a little levity on this program because this stuff gets really, really heavy. I'll tell you, man. Yeah. It's a
Can't make it up, Collier. Can't make this up.
You really can't. It's astonishing. When officers get themselves in a predicament like this, really where they're just like what is his testimony going to look like on Wednesday? Is it just going to be he's there for the lashings? Is that really what it is? And he's just going to just have to take all of it and just
he took the stand as one of the last witnesses for the prosecution, and now we were speculating before, but it all played out today. And if you thought today was hot, well, let the fireworks begin on Wednesday.
Yeah, you said that in your email. Let the fireworks begin. What are the fireworks that you foresee coming? The fuse has been lit. So what do you think is, if you're going to speculate here, what do you think?
Speculating, I see more questioning regarding text messages. I see more calling out of lack of professionalism, that there's other things that are in the hands of the defense that they're going to bring out. But again, we have to remember that although it looks like an evisceration, Yannetti and Jackson are really highlighting the biasness. That's their end game. And so although it's painful to watch, it's a part of the strategy. And today we saw the firsthand glimpse as to what that strategy might be. I'm also looking for other communication between Proctor and the Alberts, or even Jen McCabe, so the other witnesses. And also we have to remember, I want to remind your audience that this investigation, 2 years old or close to 2 years old, there were depositions by most, if not of all of these witnesses. They were deposed. Now, a deposition, for those who don't know, it's the attorneys basically in a conference room, and you're called to be a witness, and you're under oath. It's an informal setting. You're not in a courtroom. You're not before a judge or a jury. But those are considered under oath. Your statements are considered under oath. So now when you're testifying 2 years later in front of judge and jury, and you're changing the context of your earlier witness, of your earlier testimony as a witness, the defense is going to call you out on it. And that's what you saw earlier in some of the non-law enforcement witnesses. They went back, Yannetti and Jackson went back, and in their cross-examination, they were looking to find those discrepancies, even if it just meant a simple contextual change. The utterances of, did I hit him? Did I hit him? Or was it a declaration statement where Karen was trying to figure things out in the moment, as opposed to making an affirmative statement that she indeed struck John O'Keefe with her vehicle. So all those depositions are still at play, and they still mean something today.
Yeah. There, one of the things too, when they were talking about him sharing photographs of her coming out of the police station, or which it was called a certain name. I can't remember what it was. You would know. The barracks. Okay. Out of the barracks. Yeah. Barracks. That's right. Out of the barracks. Like, is that, I mean, that's like privileged information, is it not?
Again, it's sheer unprofessionalism. If someone wanted that picture, get it off of New York Post, get it off of the local news media covering. Why would you offer that in, right? Because you're there. Why would you go ahead and just expose, someone that's being, it's in bad taste.
Yeah, and also just not very smart. Not very smart. And yeah, I don't know. So about 2 weeks left, you think? 2 weeks, 2 weeks this goes to the jury?
Yeah, I think we're going to see what's going to be really interesting is what the instruction to the jury is going to be from the judge. Well, let me, before the instruction, of course, is the closing arguments. And again, the timeline is going to be critical. And then from there, the dismantling of the production of evidence and the dismantling of statements by witnesses. This the butt dials, the communication that were testified as butt dials. All those factors are going to be wrapped up in the defense's closing remarks, and then the instruction to the jury. If they find Karen Reed guilty, then what are those parameters to find her guilty on second degree or motor vehicle homicide? I believe it's the second charge. And then if there is if there is reasonable doubt, at least in one juror, then you now are set up for, at minimal, a happening, but that's what a mistrial is, or an acquittal, which is not guilty, not innocent, but the case can't be retried, or a straight out innocent verdict or a straight out guilty verdict.
I have a feeling if this case comes back with a guilty verdict, there's going to be a massive backlash in the community.
Without a doubt. It's I think that the in both shows, the relationship between policing, we can go as far, I think it's fair to say, not just police, but government in general. It was such in polarizing times. And, here we are where you have this local murder case, and it just took on its own. And you have the world of the internet that has just sped up this thing, and it has just exposed it on such a massive scale to the world in such a short time. Massachusetts, it's a condensed state. There's a lot of people here, but we're not, I don't think we're a high profile state, unless you want to go back into history and talk about colonies and all
Sure.
that stuff. But
Sure.
you've got some other states that there's, Florida, California, New York. So there's a lot of things happening in other parts of the country. In it's almost like Massachusetts is back
You
on
guys
map
were the
just
stable
because
ones.
of this single case.
You guys were the stable ones to me. All the crazies live out here on the West Coast. At least I was convinced.
No, we got them here, man. We got them here too.
But but to your point, why do you think this has become such a high profile, gotten so much attention? I mean, I know what I think, but what do you think?
Sure. I again, just personal opinion. So we've got cases that happen every day, that mass shootings that happened here, and you have stories that talk about the conduct of police officers. Then you have the stories of police officers that have fallen in line of duty. This particular case is so unique by itself. You had a district attorney that had DA Morrissey that had a decision to bring this case forward. We have a dead police officer, and I all due respect to John O'Keefe and his family, but you have a dead police officer on the front lawn of a home in a small suburb of Boston. How do you not bring the case forward? First and foremost, that it's, how do you not bring that case? Someone's got to have justice for this fallen police officer. Then when you start peeling back the nature of the case, now you've got that potential domestic angle. Was there something that was spiraling out of control in their relationship? And now you've got this provocative case now because it's the current girlfriend of this police officer. So it just seemed like it got a snowball effect. It started really small. They didn't know what they had, and then boom, it turned into this monster of a story and a monster of a case. Then you have this allegations of conspiracy. Oh, wait a minute. Everyone loves a good conspiracy. And so it just kept snowballing, and it just got bigger. And then now it's like a meteor, and it can't be stopped.
Yeah, I also think a lot of people look at Karen Reed and go, that could be me, right?
Yes. Nobody knew who she was before this.
No. And I think that a lot of people think, again, they have a lot of speculation or skepticism around law enforcement. And, obviously we've seen this and heard of this in minority communities for decades. And to see this play out in a different type of scenario, I think has really caught the world by storm.
Carla, let's similarity in the OJ case. OJ, again, very successful athlete, very successful businessman in his second career. By all means, one of the most beloved personalities that graced our TVs in the big screen. And what was significant about the OJ trial was the financial means that he had to hire Johnny Cochran, Kardashian, all of the other high profile without OJ attorneys. And we can draw a parallel to the Karen Reed case because you have two extremely successful attorneys in Attorney Jackson and United, and they have had the high profile cases and been cases prior to Karen Reed's situation. So, that then goes back to the general public, again, to your point, that could be me. Hire a defense team like that. So again, it's the polarizing aspect is, if God forbid, if I was in a situation, what's my counsel going to look like? Am I going to have to get the public defender that I'm going to have 2 hours to meet with, and then pretty much it's a hope and a prayer to see what my life is going to be? So I think those factors are really things that make sense to bring into the conversation.
I would agree. My guest today is Todd McGhee. He is a retired Massachusetts state trooper. After a successful 24-year career in public safety, he provides international training and education for the U.S. Department of State, Office of Antiterrorism Assistance. He also contributes to mainstream media, including this program, providing insight and analysis on homeland security, active shooter, aviation security, and school security related topics. Todd, thank you so much for coming on the program again on such short notice. And you'll be on Canton Confidential tomorrow night, right?
Yeah, it'll be my 6th appearance.
I'll be tuning in. Everybody check out Todd on Canton Confidential tomorrow. What time is that? It's like 7 o'clock, right?
7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And they do a nice job. They give a recap of the case, a recap of the testimony, testimony tomorrow, but you'll do a recap of what was in the court for the day. One of their journalists, Sue O'Connell, does a great job. She's in trial every day, and she'll share their emotions, reactions, any of the witness testimony and their reactions, and then they'll bring on subject matter experts, and we'll weigh in on what transpired throughout the day. And I typically will provide information on the law enforcement.
Amazing. It's amazing.
And some of the evidence that was presented into the.
That's amazing. I will be tuning in for sure. And thank you so much, man. I greatly appreciate your insights, and thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Collier.
You're welcome. Mover Nation, we get through another day in the Karen Reed trial, a wild day. Again, thank you so much to my guest, Todd McGhee, retired Massachusetts State Trooper. He just has so much unique insight. And like we said, please check him out on Canton Confidential tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow night, June 11th. He's also a happy man because the Boston Celtics are just demolishing the Dallas Mavericks. But yes, Mover Nation, I know it has been a long day if you tuned in with me. I've been up since 4 a.m. talking about this. It was a wild day in the Karen Read trial, if you guys know. We did not get to play too much of the video from the trial, but you can check out the trial recaps that I have from the day, the live streams as well. But look, if you did watch, this has been a day filled with a lot of really intense emotions, feelings, some very derogatory statements made in court towards different people and different disabilities and women. It was not a good day. It was not a good look for Trooper Michael Procter on the witness stand. But please, on that note, like, try to do something fun tonight. Try to do something cool. Like, go out, get some fresh air, pet your dog, love your kids. Realize that like the whole world is not like this. There are just some people that just are very misguided, to say the least. And it's not always like this. That's just my 2 cents. Look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not in law enforcement, but I am just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. Mover Nation, we get through another one. I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. And on that note, be kind to one another. And here's the outro. Mover Nation, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. And for more exclusive content, behind the scenes videos, monthly VIP meet and greets and watch parties, please consider supporting me on Patreon or by becoming a YouTube channel member. If you like this video, check out this one right here or this one right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps with the algorithm. On that note, I'm Collier Landry. I'll see you on the next one. Good girl, Marisol. Good girl.